the same.
They are the same, exactly, because they are always going to engage in interpersonal communication. And then if you look at the point twos, they're always going to engage in interpretive, and they're always going to engage in presentational as well. Okay. All right, let's keep going. We did that already. Now, if you look at page 9, we're still in communication, but we've gotten into a new area that's called functions. Okay, and later on, as we're moving through the modules, we're going to deal with the concept of functional objective, meaning what do you want students to be able to do with language? And it is not that they would conjugate the verb correctly. It's an actual communicative task that they can do with that. So number 1.4, list, name, identify, and enumerate, and that's for all skills and also culture. Okay. 1.5, identify learned words and phrases. Notice it says identify. It doesn't say explain. It says identify. Okay. And 1.6, reproduce and present a written, oral, or signed product in a culturally authentic way. This is another one of those sort of reality check pieces. Our level 1 and mostly our level 2s are going to be solidly in stage 1. It is perfectly acceptable for them to reproduce something. They don't have to create something themselves. Best example that I have on this is with your level 1 students, do you have them look at menus from the target culture?
Yes.
The answer probably is yes. And then do you ask them maybe to imagine that they are setting up a restaurant and create their own menu, but basically they're reproducing the menu that they saw or something similar to what they saw? That's perfectly acceptable. It's totally stage appropriate for them to imitate an authentic document to produce their own document. You're not going to say, you've got to write a menu and I'm not going to show you any examples ahead of time. Okay? So it's perfectly acceptable for them to reproduce something. Okay. Take a look at the function elements of stage 1 and stage 2 and compare. Pick one of them. It's like 1.4 and 2.4. What is different? What is the hallmark of moving into stage 2, for example? And you can go ahead and post that in your chat, in the chat window, or if you'd like to speak, that works too. Anyone have an idea?
I think everybody went for coffee.
Maybe. Oh, there we go. There we got some chat. Okay. So the content is still predictable, but students engage with each other and there's spontaneity, use of many communicative skills. Right. In stage 1, it's very, very formulaic, list, list, list. And then in stage 2, they're beginning to interact more and using language that they perhaps pull from other experiences as well. Okay. Anyone else? Take a look at number 6, where I had been talking about the reproducing, and in 2.6, they're producing. So they're moving into that ability to be essentially more original with their communication as opposed to imitating a communication. Any other comments? Okay, let's go ahead and move on because we had a little break in our things. The next area is cultures. And here you're going to see, and those of you who are familiar with ACTFL's 5Cs and World Readiness Standards, you know that one of our predominant terminology pieces with cultures is the idea of product, practice, and perspective. Okay, so this is where those three categories come into play. You're able to connect and compare your own culture with the target culture. And for example, products. All right, a product is an object that is unique to the target culture and is usually associated with that target culture. So for example, hi Morgan, it could be foods, art, literature, music, clothing, etc., etc. Any other ideas for cultural products?
Festivities like Day of the Dead or a
Mhm.
quinceañera or something like that.
Right, a particular celebration that's unique to that culture, the quinceañera, for example, the Day of the Dead, and then all of the objects that are associated, symbolic of, and used in Day of the Dead, of course. Okay. All right, so that's products. Practices are exactly what you would assume they are, the behaviors of the native speakers of the target culture. Okay. Things like greetings. Is there a particular way that they do greetings? Is there a concept of formal and informal language, for example? The idea of, do you bring a gift to the hostess of the dinner or do you not bring a gift? So think of the cultures that you are teaching, your target language cultures, and what are some practices that come to mind that you associate with that target language culture? Okay, you can turn on your mic and speak. No worries, Morgan. Glad to have you with us. Go ahead.
In Latin America, we hug and kiss, but the Argentinians, they touch the back of the person to make sure they don't have a knife. So that's the kind of like the hug that they do. So that's what I teach my students, and they're confused and glad they know that.
Yeah, I'm glad I know that too. Yeah. Other practices, behaviors that are typically associated with your target cultures.
For French, we talk about understatements. So not ever coming out and admitting that something's great, but it's just not bad.
Okay.
And that can cause confusion for them sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I remember Kazue Masuyama said something about her, that she took a student group to Japan in January, I think, and the concept of no in Japan. There are many different ways to interpret the word no, and they don't ever want to actually say the word no because it would be impolite, and so they have to say it in a different way so that they mean no, but they haven't actually said no, and that just blew my mind. Okay, Lisa, did you want to add something?
Oh, no, it's okay.
Okay. All right.
Valerie put some things in the chat.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Oh, hands on the table when eating. Yeah. Yeah. Kissing cheeks. Arriving late at dinner parties. Is that acceptable? Is it unacceptable? And so on. And this is where we get into cultural misunderstandings. When you go, wherever you go, you always bring your own culture with you. And you may think you understand what's going on in the culture that you're visiting, but you're always going to have that lens of your own culture, and it often interferes. So we're gonna do a little bit of work with that in a few minutes here. Perspectives are the sort of cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? The cultural values that are overlying those behaviors and those products. Okay, if you think of it as the products are the what, the perspectives or the practices may be the how, and then the perspectives are the why. The why do they do that, and what does it reflect of their cultural value system, okay? Often it is connected, a perspective is almost never all by itself. It's almost always connected with a product and or a practice, or maybe both. Okay? For example, one of the good examples that Nicole Naditz always likes to throw out there is waiters in a French cafe or a French restaurant. Well, Americans might go on a trip in Paris, and they go to the restaurant and they sit down and they have their dinner, and they find it incredibly rude because the waiter is not bringing them their check. They have to actually ask for it. Well, what's happening here is a reflection of the value system in France, where the waiter would never dream of interrupting your very important enjoyment of your dinner. They are going to hold back and wait until you desire that they come. They're not going to interfere. They're not going to get in the way. So, if we take French people to someplace like Applebee's or whatever, and they go, "Hi, my name's Brad," and they come by every 10 minutes and they're, "Hey, is everything okay?" And their perspective on this is, "Wow, that's really invasive." So it's really interesting to get into the perspectives. What does the action of the person reflect about the cultural value system? Okay. All right. So we're going to play some Kahoot. Did I have somebody who'd like to make a comment?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on one of the things that Valerie said. Hands on the table while eating. In this culture, it's totally forbidden. I mean, you're supposed to have your hands in your lap and certainly under the table, except for the one you're eating with. And it's the same, as I understand, in Spain. You have your hands on the table because that way they're sure you're not stealing food, putting it in your lap. And my guess about our culture is it's exactly the same reason. You don't have your hands on the table, so you're not going to take more than is yours to take.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And those kinds of really fascinating connections between a behavior and what is the backstory on that behavior is always fascinating, and complicated too. Very complicated. So we're going to go use your mobile device. So you got your phone or your iPad. Last time we played with Kahoot, and so I'm going to ask you to go to kahoot.it. And I'm going to go get the game pin up and running. So I will break away from the presentation right now. And there we go. Oops. There we go. Oh, no. All right. No. All right. And okay, I believe you should be able to see my screen. And here comes the game pin. Is everyone able to see the game pin?
Yes, I can see it.
Yes? Okay. There's Julia. So. Carol. All right, Daphne and Jennifer, are you joining us?
Do you want us to?
You can.
No, I'm not.
No, you're not? Okay. All right. Is there anyone else that we're waiting for? I think this is everybody. So what we're doing on this one is a survey. It's like what we did last time. It's not a competition. We'll let Jennifer do the competition. She has fun with that. So this is just a survey. You're going to answer your opinion. Okay. And let's get started. Here we go. So be sure to read the question and the 4 options. So the question is, what is this an example of?
I've heard you talk about these before. I'd really like to try one sometime.
Yeah, it's a little bit like marzipan in Germany.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. So all 6 of you decided it was a product, and that is absolutely correct. It is a product. But
Yay.
Anyone know about calisson? My French teaching friends.
Yes.
Yes. What do you know about calisson?
I do not.
Oh, okay. Calisson are, Daphne, you got something on this?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Just see if I get it right. Calisson are a particular candy that was originally, now you can get them at any time of the year, they're I believe they're primarily made in the south of France, but you can get them all over France now because of shipping and all that kind of stuff. They were made in a particular region, and they were typically associated with a particular celebration. I believe it was that they were associated with Easter and springtime kind of renewal and so on and so forth. Is that what you're aware of, Daphne?
I think so.
Okay.
They're covered with the white, and they have the kind of a specific diamond shape.
Exactly. And so in this case, for me, knowing that background knowledge, would you change your vote?
Actually, I tried to vote for the green.
Good.
And it didn't take. It put me in red.
Oh, bummer. Yeah, in this case, it would be a combination of the above. Probably a product for sure. Potentially a practice, because I believe there's also a tradition of giving them as sort of like favors to visitors who come to your house. And then ultimately potentially a perspective, because it's associated with a particular celebration, and it's the renewal of the spring and celebrating new life and all so on. Okay? All right, let's move on. Next one. Okay, closing the business door right at closing time, even if people are in line. Okay, so now we've got majority of people who think it's a combination. Somebody who voted that it was a combination, want to turn on your mic and let us know?
Well, I would have thought it was more a combination of practice and perspective. I wasn't too sure about the product, but since there was no combination for practice and perspective,
right,
I chose a combination of the above.
Exactly. And it is absolutely a combination of a practice that they close the business door when closing time comes, even if there's still people there, and a perspective. And the perspective here is that time spent with your family is ultimately more important than doing more business. And so it is an accepted practice, and the perspective represented is that, not that I hate you customers, it's that I need to go and be with my family. This is my family's time. And so it's not a practice or a perspective that Americans think of very often, because we tend.
I often tell my students that they're capitalists, but to the point of prioritizing their family before that, whereas our expectation is to prioritize the customer.
The customer, exactly. And that's the difference in the perspective. Okay, good job.
I just had a thought. If you see somebody doing something in a different culture and you say, why? That's a perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. If your reaction is, why are they doing that, then it's probably something representing a perspective unique to that culture. All right, let's try another one.
I wonder if all practices are perspectives as well. You know, like there's a reason that people do just about everything. Got it.
Exactly. All right, so choosing a more formal greeting because you don't know the person well. All right, same thing. So we've got targeting in on practice, because obviously this is a, Valerie, you got kicked out? That's no fun.
Yes, it looks like I'm stuck on question 2, and it doesn't let me go any further.
Well, that's unfortunately what happens with Kahoot a little bit. Are you able to see my screen on the computer?
Yes, on the computer I'm fine, but I'm stuck on question.
Yeah, you just can't vote. Okay. So you can go ahead and watch us and have your own idea there. So yeah, in this case, this is kind of a no-brainer, the formal greeting versus the informal greeting, because you don't know the person very well. So it's a combination of practice and perspective, definitely. You might say there's a product if there's like a kissing of cheeks or a bowing or something like that, but it's more likely to be practice and perspective. All right, let's try one more, and then I want to get us back to our program here. So not inviting a coworker to your house or to a cafe. That was supposed to say or to a cafe. Okay, so Valerie has chatted that she thinks it's, I'm going to say that's a practice and a perspective, PNP, since they're all Ps. And everybody seemed to think that it was a combination. Anyone want to have a little comment on that one? I don't know why it's got a typo, but okay. How would this be a practice and representing a perspective? Cricket.
Well, it's a practice because that's what people do.
Exactly.
For example, in France, that's yes, the behavior, but there is a reason why, is that we usually are very private, and we really do not mix work and family life very easily.
Exactly. And again, it's an American might see that happening and go, why? Because you would normally socialize with the people that you work with, and so on and so forth. All right, great. I'm going to go ahead.
I could see that as even. Oh, sorry. I could see that as even being within, like urban and rural. Like if you're in a village context, you can't have those separate spheres in the same way. But in a city and you know, any kind of bigger, you could have those separations. But in the village, like, there's no secrets.
There's no secrets, exactly, and everybody knows everybody's business, and so on and so forth. You're absolutely right. So it's going to be a different practice perspective depending on, is it a very small living environment, or is it the big city? Good point. Very good point. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take us back to our presentation, because I want to get back to, here we go. All right, so we're in culture, and I'm figuring out what I'm doing here. There we go. All right, so in stage 1, if you're on page 10, stage 1, culture, we've got students use appropriate responses to rehearsed situations. So these are things that we practice a lot. Students associate the products, practices, and perspective with the target culture. So we might ask them to do a very simple matching activity. And they recognize similarities and differences. Notice they only can recognize them. They can pick them out. They can't explain them. And they identify cultural borrowings. If you're not sure what that means, a cultural borrowing is something that comes from another culture that culture borrows into it. A really good example is the fact that in California, at least, it's very common to have a piñata at a child's birthday party. And that's a borrowing that has happened over the years, bringing the piñata from Mexico, and now it's something that's kind of pervasive in California culture. Okay. All right. So you notice that what's happening here with culture in stage 1 is the ability to recognize, the ability to pick out of a list, but no ability to respond if it was not a rehearsed situation, and no ability to explain. Okay. So we may be able to think pair share, we may not be able to, but take a look at the elements 1.0 and 1.2 across the chart. Okay. What's happening as you progress up the stage level? Okay. And you can either chat a private text to another person in the room, and you do that by clicking on their name in the list of participants. I think you right-click on it, and then we will talk about what's going on. Oh, sorry, Julia. Yeah, the standards document right here. Yes, you can just pick anyone you'd like, or if you feel more comfortable just going ahead and speaking to the whole group on your microphone, that would work as well. We give everybody another minute or so to do a little discussion or thinking. Morgan, are you talking about the standards document? Yeah, that's actually in the module, in module 2. Item number 10 is the actual standards document. It's a PDF to download and you can print. Okay, so would somebody like to turn on their mic and let us know, what did you notice about the progression across 1.0, 2.0, 3.0? Anyone? How did the language change? Go ahead, Valerie.
Okay, I'll try. You mean for the first one? I did the number
1.0.
1.0. Yes. So I would say it starts with the idea that there's absolutely no. I mean, everything is predictable and known.
Yep.
So all they do is repetition, basically. then we move on to a choice. The choice is the choice expands. But you still have to find the appropriate response, probably with things that they've rehearsed as well. But there's more choice. In the second at level 3, I would say a certain amount of how do you say? There's the predictability starts diminishing.
Exactly, and the key word here is complications.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, but they probably still quite prepared, mm-hmm. and that's but not so much. And at 4, they're totally unprepared. They're in real life, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens here is, if you think about the typical student goes to visit the target culture and they're walking down the street and someone comes up to them and says something to them, and it was not one of the things that they rehearsed with their teacher, they can't function because they're stage 1. But by the time they're stage 3, the person comes up to them and asks them a totally unpredictable question, and they can start to handle the complication because it wasn't something that they predicted. So that's exactly right, what's happening across those stages.
The first day that I was in France for living there, someone asked me, vous avez le feu, if I had a light, but I didn't know that's the same word for fire.
Right.
And so at that point, I wasn't a novice or anything, so I could think, okay, and respond, no, I don't smoke.
Uh-huh.
Like, I realized that they weren't asking me to light a building on fire. But that was unpredictable, but I was able to, appropriately respond to
mm-hmm.
it. But so that was kind of an example of that.
Mm-hmm. And what you see here is you see scaffolding. You see the rehearsed, then you see, okay, now pick between these 2 options. One of them is going to be correct. And then you see, now, what would you do if this happened? So you're getting that more release of control and giving more options to the learner. All right, great. Let's go on here. So I want you to think about this. We're not going to take a long time to talk about this right now, but how is what you're already doing regarding culture reflected in these standards? So as you're looking at these standards, what are you already doing? Are you doing the appropriate? Are you phrasing the cultural activities that are happening appropriately to their stage? Or do you maybe need to push yourself a little bit more? You never know, okay? So the reality check, we've talked about this before, is that students are likely going to be stage 1 and stage 2 in a typical high school environment, even up into college, and that native speaker heritage programs might peak into stage 3, but they're not going to do it across the board. So don't be unrealistic about how your students can interact with the concept of culture, okay? Now let's get to structures, our ever favorite one, okay? We start with orthography, phonology, and parameters. That's a term for ASL. If you know anything about signing, the signing needs to happen in kind of a box that's related to the torso, and where you sign is going to determine or give it a certain communicative quality, where something is signed in that box of parameters, okay? And you have also definitions of these in the glossary at the back of the standards document as well. Morphology, which is the rules for how words are formed, so prefixes and suffixes, etc. Grammar and syntax, and those are the rules for how sentences are formed. Semantics, which are meaning systems that are language-based, and then pragmatics, and this is where we always defer to Dr. Brown because she's our resident linguistics master. But this is meaning systems that are connected to how you use the language, okay, as opposed to what the words are. One of the examples we always like to use is the mother talking to Johnny and saying, Johnny, whose turn is it to take the garbage out? So there are 2 ways to interpret that. Johnny might be, mom might be confused, and depending on her tone of delivery, she might say, Johnny, whose turn is it to take the garbage out? She's genuinely asking who's supposed to take the garbage out. If she puts the little zinger on it, Johnny, whose turn is it to take the garbage out? Mom doesn't need to be told whose turn it is. She knows Johnny's turn, and she's giving him a meaning system or meaning in the way she's using the words. Okay, so all of these things come into play in structures. Let's take a look at page 11 in stage 1 structures, and you have 1.0, 1.1, and 1.2. So you've got the using the phonology, orthography, and so on to understand. They're using it to produce, and they're using it they're identifying similarities and differences. So really what we've got here is 1.0 is almost the interpretive. They're understanding things. 1.1 is the presentational. They're producing, and then they're able to identify similarities and differences. As you scan across, you see that there's a parallel across the different stages where they go from being able to identify similarities and differences in single words to sentence level to paragraph level. So it looks very much like the communication standards where it said the type of text type that they would be using. Okay. Now, here's the great question. Where is the grammar in structures? So go ahead and scan the different stages and the different descriptors, and what words in the structure standards refer specifically to grammar. Go ahead and put your answer in the chat. All right, so we have Lisa. You noticed sentence level elements and the word syntax, excuse me. Okay, any other? I'm stuck. Syntax, yes, you're absolutely right. Syntax is the word that's cueing grammar. Anyone else?
Well, morphology is kind of grammar too, because that's what we spend a lot of time doing with our students, drilling plural versus singular,
masculine, feminine
versus present. Yeah, exactly. So both morphology and syntax are part of grammar.
Okay, so I think everybody's coming to the same agreement. Now here's the question. Oh no, that's not the question. So the question is, where does syntax make an appearance first? You can talk on your microphone if you'd like. Where does the word syntax first appear? Which stage?
Stage 2.
Stage 2. Exactly. And that can be a bit of a shock, especially to people who are, extremely wedded to their grammar. Does it mean we don't do grammar with stage 1 learners? No, we do grammar, but we have the understanding that they don't master it until they have mastered stage 2. And by that I mean that they are across the board spontaneously able to produce everything that is stage 2. And so that's a long way down. If we remember that we're talking about stage 1 and stage 2 in a 4-year program, this is why we we teach a grammar concept or a structure to our level 1 or even level 2 students, and they take the quiz and they pass the quiz, and then the next week we ask them to use it again and it's completely gone. And we're frustrated with them. It's like, but I taught it. Yeah, but they haven't mastered it yet. Okay, so we go ahead and create grammar structures in our communicative chunks, but realize that the students are not going to master it until they have fully mastered stage 2. Okay? So hopefully that's a big aha for a lot of people, and hopefully that will kind of give you permission to say, okay, that's why I keep having to review this particular structure, because the other thing is, that you move on to the next structure, they master that and they have forgotten the one they just learned, because it's whatever is first and foremost right now that's going to stick. So give yourself a break is what I would say. All right, any questions about structures? Yes, you're always reviewing, constantly reviewing. You're absolutely right, Morgan. And that is normal language development. They don't, unfortunately, we can't stick a USB in their head and download it and it's all there. It's a process over time, and it is a, we know that we still make mistakes in the language, right? And it's just something that happens. So the mastery of grammar is not our end all and be all. We want to have them be able to function in the language, and sometimes you don't absolutely have to have all the grammatical structures correct in order to communicate. In fact, that happens a lot. Okay. All right, let's talk about settings and move along here. So settings are a variety of situations and contexts that will determine the type of languages that's being used. And if you turn to page 12 in the document right there, you will see that the settings chart is not very big. It basically talks about where do people use the language, okay? And so 1.0, they use it in highly predictable, common daily settings. Now, think about your French 1 or your Spanish 1 class. What is the context, or where do they use the language? In class, you're absolutely right, Julia. They use it in your classroom. They're not using it, mostly, not using it out in the real world. So you've got a highly predictable, common daily setting. You have a routine. They know exactly what they're going to do. It's safe and it's predictable. But once you get, and then 1.1, they are able to recognize age-appropriate cultural opportunities, okay? Notice it doesn't say that they necessarily participate in them. They recognize them. So they see a flyer for a ballet folklorico presentation and they talk to you about it. They say, hey, I could go here and I might hear some Spanish, right? So they recognize the opportunities that are available to them. Once you get into 2.0, they are now starting to branch out of that highly predictable setting, which is your classroom, and they start to participate actively in the appropriate activities in their community or online, for that matter. Okay. Right. Oh, yes, absolutely, Morgan. Sometimes if you greet them outside of class in the target language, it's not that's not where they see you speaking Spanish or speaking French, and so it kind of freaks them out a little bit. I actually try to go around school and basically greet everybody in the target language, even if they're not in my class, and they're used to it now. That crazy woman who wanders around going bonjour. So okay, now take a look at the settings table on page 12. And can you name the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0? Could you name a setting where that language might happen? So students use language in interpersonal settings. Where could that be? Students use language in informal and formal settings. where would that be? You can either chat it or you can turn on your mic. Email, online games, Skype, yep. That could be interpersonal. It could be, yeah, French Club could be, especially if French Club goes off campus and does something out in the community, that starts to be a 2.0, or if they are, for example, here in Sacramento, there's the French Film Festival. If they go to the French Film Festival, that could be 2.0. It could even be 3.0, depending on their language ability. Pen pals, pen pals or e-pals, and that gets into the 2.0 because it's interpersonal. It might actually be involved, especially also if they do any kind of study abroad. That also starts to get into the stage 2, stage 3. Okay. All right, texting friends. Good, great examples. So it's really with settings, it's really about thinking outside the box, thinking about where are the places that language might be used. And we've all had the situation where the kid comes to you, Miss Lanphier, I was at my job at Target and there was a French guy who came up and he was talking to me and I was talking to him, and totally out of the blue, not anticipated, but an opportunity to use the language. Okay. All right. Now, I think we've talked a little bit about this already with the 2.1 of settings, where they're participating in age-appropriate cultural activities. If there's an opportunity for a, as I said, the French language film or the French Film Festival, or if there's an opportunity to go to some sort of a fiesta or a celebration, there's an opportunity to participate in a World Language Day at Sac State. All of those are starting to get into the 2.1. So once they go and actually participate in the activity, it's peaking into stage 2. All right. Now, how do you begin aligning? Okay, we're running short on our time. We're not going to do the alignment activity in class. Today. I'm going to ask you to kind of do it on your own. But bottom line, what you start doing is you take the things you already do and you align them. You say, here's this wonderful project that I do every year and it's always a real big success. Which of these standards am I hitting on that project? Okay, so you would identify the standards that are already there. You would go to content, and for example, if we're looking at the Spanish 2 travel fair sample document, this is about travel, so I would find the content that's about travel. It also involves a map. I would look for a content that would be related to geography. Okay, what communication would the students be expected to do? Where does it fall in the communications and functions? What culture aspects are represented in the activity? What structures, what settings? So once you've done that, you might say, oh, I don't have anything related to cultures. Can I add something that will make more rich from the standpoint of hitting the culture standards? Okay. So I'm not going to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and email you guys or share the Google Doc with you for this live session. And when you go in to do the alignment practice, I've got an area for the Espanol and one for the Francais. And you can type your name, and you can go ahead and type down what are the different standards elements that you see in this activity. Obviously, this is not an activity that you invented, so you might need to read between the lines and say, if they do this, I think it's a stage 2, but if they only do that, it's a stage 1. Okay, and you would note the element numbers. So what you have to do is you have to, thank you, Jen, for the I'm assuming that's Jen. No, Daphne. Thank you, Daphne. The way you would note this is you would write content, and then you would write the element numbers 1.1, cultures 1.2, et cetera, et cetera. If you just go 1.1, 1.2, they all have the same numbers. So you have to specify which of the 5 areas it is and then the number that you're referring to. Okay? Any questions on that? I will end up probably posting actually a link to the Google Doc on the module as well. Okay. Daphne has posted it, so that was we were going to be talking about that in debriefing, but we had a bit of a technical problems. So the last activity in quote unquote module 1, and thank you Julia for I think it was Julia for asking about it, and I discovered this morning I purposely did not release emissaries until 11:30 today because I wanted us to go through this conversation first. But now, based on what you know about the standards, we want you to go into that journal entry and answer the question, if a colleague, parent, or administrator asked you about the standards, what would you tell them? Okay, and you're going to write in the journal area. The other thing is there will be a couple more activities that are going to release in addition to emissaries, and I think one more activity that will release after this session. So module 2, you may have completed everything that was there as of this morning, but there's still going to be a couple more things to get done before you move on. Okay. So wrapping it up, these are some upcoming activities. The Flags Fall Workshop, this is the CLTA affiliate here in Sacramento, is going to be next Saturday. We'll be at Sac State. If you're interested, we're going to be talking about the can-do statements. Nicole and I are going to do the presentation. And there's information on the Flags website, flagsteacher.com, or you can just email me directly because I'm the one taking the registrations. And then Module 3 will open on October 18th, and Module 2 office hours October 21st. Again, that's optional. Just there if you have a question and would like to talk about something. And Module 3 live session will be October 31st, well before the trick-or-treaters come around. Okay? Any questions? Nope. Okay. Make sure that you complete all the activities in the module, and the journal, the emissaries journal activity will be coming. It's actually going to be released at 11:30, so that'll be in about a minute or so. And make sure that you're completing the evaluation for the module that are at the end, and also the pre-survey. Carol mentioned that while I was off trying to fix my technology. Okay. Thank you very much. I apologize for the little glitch, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your weekend.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. You too.